Hey guys, remember when I said that Nightmare Ned was one of the most underrated shows that Disney ever released next to another show by the company?
This aesthetic actually fits the tone of the show just as much as another Disney show that I'll talk about another time, and ironically enough, that particular series is also obscure and uses the same multicolored skin aesthetic. Although, even though I don't think that this is my favorite cartoon show from Disney, I will say that I do think that it's one of their most underrated shows, along with another series that I'm also planning a review for, but that's another series entirely.
Well, I made this very well known that this is the other series that I was talking about, so this is another tragic one that unfortunately got mistreated by Disney. It wasn't treated as bad as Nightmare Ned, since the series was given more than 4 months on the air, and this series lasted for 2 seasons with 39 episodes. But then again, that is not saying much. The show still didn't last that long. The remaining episodes were thrown onto Toon Disney before Disney's One Saturday Morning officially became defunct. And lastly, after 2006, the show was not seen again on any of the other Disney channels, nor was the show even given any reruns. However, this was for the remainder of the 2000s decade and into most of the 2010 decade. The show didn't get distributed anywhere again until Disney Plus came, and now it has the whole show on there. But still, it is rather peculiar how badly Disney treated this one. I mean, it's not like Disney was trying to follow a trend or tried desperately hard to fit in with the cool kids like certain shows that they previously did in the 90s. This show was set in a school setting, like a lot of other Disney cartoon shows at the time. The show was about a dog using a secret identity to go to school, and the show could get very surreal. This wasn't too out of the norm for Disney to do at this point, considering the fact that a lot of other Disney shows at this time did the school setting. This is even reoccurring by surreal standards on One Saturday Morning, considering the fact that Lloyd in Space premiered 4 months after this show premiered. So what happened? What was in this show that was such a monumental failure that Disney stopped giving it attention? Well, I do have 2 potential answers, so I'm not going to discuss them until after I get through everything else like the plot, animation, characters, all those things. So I'll discuss on the things that might have killed this show after all of everything else. So, let's begin. This show revolves around a dog by the name of Spot. His dream is to become a boy and do all of the things that his owner Leonard does, instead of just sitting in the house with all the other pets all day. But there's a problem. Spot is a dog. So what he does is that he disguises as Scott Ledready II and goes to the school nearby him, which coincidentally is the same school that his owner Leonard goes to, and the same school that his mom goes to as the teacher of his class. But Leonard ends up finding out that Scott Ledready II is actually his dog Spot. So for the rest of the series, both Leonard and Scott have to make sure that Scott's secret of him being Leonard's dog Spot isn't revealed. Meanwhile, getting into wacky and surreal situations with the slice of life tone. How can I describe the show the best way that I can? Okay, so imagine Ren and Stimpy in Rocko's Modern Life, the surrealism of Rocko, and the feeling in the animation style of Ren and Stimpy. You give the show a slice-of-life feeling to it and give each of the characters a multicolor aesthetic reminding you of Doug. And lastly, the facts about education aspect from Animaniacs, and you combine all of these aspects into a blender. That's exactly what you get with this series right here. The things that I enjoy the most about Teacher's Pet is its entertainment value on how it took a concept that would have sounded boring or dumb and actually did something with it. Every single episode that I've seen from this show took something as mundane as school, show and tell, square dancing, etc., and actually made it fun in this show. Not to mention, the show can get very surreal and silly that you would accept it and say, okay, that was pretty strange, but really silly. Like in one episode, episode 5 being Mrs. Leadready, during Spot's song sequences, the moon has a face for some reason. It's pretty strange, but it's so absurd that I like it. There's also What's Sweat Got to Do with It, where Leonard gets so nervous around Leslie that his hands start sweating. He has a dream where his hands are so sweaty that it started flooding his classroom, and when the episode gets to the point where Leonard tries to dance with Leslie, his hands morph into clams or a faucet running water. And finally, Don't Bite the Hound That Feeds You, where French fleas travel onto Spot's body and starts biting at him. There's also other episodes that have absurd scenes only, while everything else in these episodes are more down-to-earth and slice-of-life-like. But I decided to give a mention to them anyway. Those episodes being Costume Pity Party, Fifi, You Can't Bite City Hall, Never Take Candy from a Kindergartner, Bad Fur Day, The Tale of the Telltale Taffy, and Don't Make It My Brown Eyes Green. And the other thing that makes me enjoy this show a lot is the show's character dynamic. Unlike Nightmare Ned, where because that show was cut so short, none of the characters besides Ned were fleshed out. It wasn't the show's fault that the characters weren't fleshed out very well. The show was introducing the concept and the characters that we would be spending time with, since the first season of the series often does that. So because that show wasn't renewed for a second season, they didn't get the chance to flesh out its characters. Teacher's Pet at the very least lasted for 39 episodes across 2 seasons, with the first season having 13 episodes and the second season having 26 episodes, only 8 of which were aired on ABC, while the last 18 aired on Toon Disney. Why did I bring up the fact that the series lasted for 2 seasons and 39 episodes? Well, that's because the show does have characters that are really fleshed out, and we really get to see most of them have a dynamic with each other. And they even get entire episodes dedicated to them that really show off their personalities and what they're going through. For example, we see a lot of episodes where one of the main characters, Leonard, is always nervous and wants to blend into the background, but can't due to his mom being the teacher at his school. And the other main character, Spot, and how he wants to expand his horizons instead of being seen as just a regular dog. Both Spot and Leonard play very well off of each other, with Leonard being an innocent kid that wants to do the right thing, while Spot is a dog that is more carefree in nature. These two also play very well off of the other characters like Mr. Jolly and Pretty Boy, which I'll get into when I talk about the characters. But first, let's talk about the animation in this series. I said in the beginning that this show has a Ren and Stimpy feeling to the art style, and I say this due to how strange, smooth, and surreal the animation can get in this series. The show's animation looks like it has a purely illustrated feeling to it in everything like the outlines, coloring, and even backgrounds. While the animation itself looks like it was done frame by frame, the overall result leads to the show's animation to be both smooth and look unique and stand out from the other shows that Disney was airing at the time on one Saturday morning, like The Weekenders or Lloyd in Space. A nice tidbit to add about the animation in this series that I like is that whenever a character notices something or gets mad, a black or red line would pop out in front of them and quickly disappear, which also adds to the purely illustrated and frame-by-frame style in the animation. Let's also discuss the big elephant in the room with this show. Yes, the characters in this show are multicolored, and it leads me into saying that, just like Nightmare Ned, that the show's aesthetics fit with the tone that the show is trying to go for. Sure, the series also goes towards the slice of life approach, much like Doug. However, Doug was a show that was supposed to be seen as more down-to-earth, so people question why that show was multicolored in the characters. But Teacher's Pet, on the other hand, is a show that is so crazy in everything that goes on in its own universe that I end up accepting what's going on in its absurd and crazy universe. Then there's the characters in this show. With 39 episodes under its belt, it gave the show plenty of time to flesh out its characters, and the show manages to do that. Sure, not every single character is fleshed out, like, we don't get any individual episode focusing on side or major characters like Leslie, Strickler, Mary Lou, Leonard's mom, and the list goes on. Which is why the show's focus on other side characters isn't quite as good as what we've seen in shows like Hey Arnold, Harvey Beaks, or even OKKO, but what we do see is still pretty good, and put a smile on my face nonetheless. Like in the episode that I mentioned earlier, being Mrs. Ledready, Spot realizes that he doesn't have a mom and sings a song twice in the episode. After that episode goes through an entire chain of events where Spot tries to swap between being his mom, Scott, and a dog, we get a heartwarming conclusion where we find out that Mary Lou is Spot's mother. There's The Grass is Always Greener, where we get to see that even though he's really grumpy and all of that, Pretty Boy has a heart and does care about his home when he went into the wild with this other bird. No substitutions, please, shows Spot and Mr. Jolly's friendship between each other, where Spot and Leonard find out that Mary Lou, their teacher, is sick and can't be the teacher that day, so Spot comes up with the plan to have Mr. Jolly be her medicine pet, which he ends up doing, and in the end of the episode, has Jolly catching her sickness and they end up sleeping together. There's also Mr. Jolly, Man or Mouser, where Leonard places a challenge with his mom to see if Mr. Jolly is able to catch a mouse that is in the house. However, Mary Lou sees Jolly more as a blob of fur than a cat, which he doesn't mind, and near the end of the episode, he's about ready to accept the fact that he wasn't able to catch a mouse until the mouse feels bad for him and plays pretend, just to say that Mr. Jolly caught a mouse, and the episode ends with it showing the friendship between Leonard and Mr. Jolly, and that Leonard is sorry for trying to turn Mr. Jolly into someone he's not, and the episode also shows his character traits and what he often goes through. So you guys might be wondering, with something as good as Teacher's Pet that premiered on the same block as shows like Recess and Pepper Ann, not to mention aired in the exact same year as shows like Buzz Lightyear of Star Command and House of Mouse, what happened? The show got good reviews, was nominated for an Oscar, and was even given a movie. How come Disney abandoned the show during the mid-2000s and this wasn't mentioned by the company again until as recent as 2019? Well, I have two theories about this whole thing. First is why the series ended. You guys may have noticed in the thumbnail for this video that I put the Toon Disney logo in there. To explain this thoroughly, I put the logo to indicate which network it aired on and what company made it. Cutting to the chase, the show moved to Toon Disney where the remaining 18 episodes in the second season would air, when only 8 episodes in the second season actually aired on ABC. Although, I don't know why they moved the show to Toon Disney, as when the show did end up moving their 18 remaining episodes to Toon Disney, Disney's One Saturday Morning on ABC was still on until September of that year when it was rebranded to ABC Kids. And the show must have been doing good in the ratings. It was airing on the same block as several other shows that were successful. So this is one that I have no idea why Disney suddenly kicked to the curb. And by the way, if you're wondering, Toon Disney at the time before 2004 came, where Jetix took over the nighttime schedule, was used for only airing the cartoon shows that were canceled by Disney. It's exactly like what Nicktoons Network and Boomerang used to do. So you could see exactly what went wrong on that decision when they thought about moving the remaining episodes to Toon Disney immediately. While I can't find any evidence giving out the reason why the show ended after 2 seasons, I can speculate that low ratings were the reason why. It's very similar to why Wander Over Yonder ended. It was moved to another network after establishing that its home was on ABC, thus ending after 2 seasons because of low ratings. And reason 2, and this is what I'm speculating is the last straw that broke the camel's back, that is the reason why Disney abandoned the show during the mid-2000s, is the overall performance of the 2004 film based on the show. This movie was released during a time where several cartoon shows from TV were getting a theatrically released film. Rugrats, Doug, The Wild Thornberrys, Pokemon, Recess, Hey Arnold, The Powerpuff Girls, SpongeBob, and Teacher's Pet, of course. However, at the same time when several of these shows had theatrically released films, while there are a good handful of them that did decently at the box office, others like Rugrats Go Wild, the Hey Arnold movie, and the Powerpuff Girls movie did not do good at the box office, and with something as obscure as Teacher's Pet, you can tell how the film did at the box office. The movie's budget was $10 million, and only made back 6.5 of the film's budget. The reason for the film's failures, I think, has something to do with the fact that the show was not popular enough to even be given a movie. We're not talking about a huge animation juggernaut like SpongeBob SquarePants or Rugrats, or even a show by the same company that was as popular as Recess and Disney's Doug. The show was so obscure that the only way that you were able to watch the show until 2006 came around was Toon Disney. And besides, the show was extremely late with the film closure for theaters, since the show ended in 2002. With something like SpongeBob, they at least kept the final few episodes near the film's theatrical release and not almost 2 years late. And reason 2 for the film's failures, from what I've heard from a YouTuber by the name of MrCoat, was because Disney barely gave any advertisement for the film, which just adds on to my point that Disney had no faith in this franchise for absolutely no reason. As for my thoughts on the movie, I think that it's good, but I don't think that it's as good as the TV show, since the film does have its share of issues. Since I do plan on giving this movie its own Sean's Yearly Review sometime in the future, I'm not going to go too much in depth with this movie, since I want to save a lot of my praise and small criticisms for sometime in the future. But nonetheless, I do really like this film. I wouldn't throw it in the category of amazing or great, definitely not in the same levels as some of the other films based on cartoons or TV shows like the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, Drake and Josh Go Hollywood, Ed, Edd n Eddy Big Picture Show, or the MLP FIM movie. I think that it's just an enjoyable 7 out of 10 kinda good. There are definitely a lot of pros. The way that the film concludes the series is serviceable, and some of the musical numbers are enjoyable and catchy, even if I do believe that others are kind of forgettable, or does wreck the continuity of the series a little bit, since no one besides Leonard knows about Spot's secret in the show. I do like Leonard and Spot's boy and dog friendship shown throughout the movie, and the bizarreness shown throughout this movie gives it a certain charm and saves the story from falling apart completely. And yeah, that's actually my biggest issue with this movie. The story is the weakest element of the film. It's not a terrible story. As I said, the charm of everything keeps the writing level in line and it prevents it from crashing throughout the film, but the story does have a small book of issues. Unlike with other animated films based on cartoons like the SpongeBob SquarePants movie and the 2017 MOP movie, this movie honestly feels like it should have been either a straight-to-TV movie or a straight-to-video movie, because a lot of the things that are in here are not on too much of a grand scale in comparison to what you have on TV. The animation also has this thing where it's directly on par with what you'd get on television, while several of its peers have completely upgraded the animation to where it's something that you would not get on television. And some of the writing choices as well do feel more in sync with something that you'd see on television, with some of the sequence dragging on and having a more episodic nature. Like with the sequence where Spot and Leonard are on the beach, or Spot and Leonard meeting up with Ian in the movie where Spot gives him his chew toy. My theory is that this movie actually was going to either be a straight-to-video or TV movie, but long in development, Disney decided to give them a chance for their film to be released in theaters, so they decided to add in more sequences to extend the film's length. Like with the moments where Pretty Boy and Mr. Jolly are trying to find Spot to warn him about this mad doctor throughout the movie, which, with the exception of the sequence where they exit the house to go to find Spot, are unnecessary sequences that could have been cut out completely. Or the end credits of the film having a CGI book that opens the pages to see the end credits. It's kind of like what happened with Doug's first movie. It was originally set for a video release, but it was sent to theaters instead to compete with everyone else that was following this trend at the time. Although, despite those particular issues that I have with this movie, I definitely enjoyed it, and I would put it above the Polar Express in terms of animated movies that were released in 2004. But whether you love or hate this movie, due to it failing, I think that Disney completely lost hope in the franchise and completely abandoned the show by 2006, pretty much doing the same thing that they did to Nightmare Ned, but to a much lesser extent. A large majority of the series was considered lost, with only the first episode being released on the film's DVD being found in any kind of format. According to the Lost Media archive on this show, the show went into Lost Media mode after 2006 when the show stopped airing on Toon Disney, and it wasn't until 2008 when several of the episodes were found, in low quality sure, but were found nonetheless. The show had zero acknowledgement by the company for a long time afterwards, until as recently as 2019, when the entire show was released on Disney+. That is a step in the right direction, but it still kind of makes me ask the question of why they treated this one as bad as they did, and why they hardly acknowledged it after 2006. Maybe they felt as if rarely acknowledging the show's existence would make them forget how badly the movie bombed, despite the fact that Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon still mentioned Hey Arnold and the Powerpuff Girls, despite the fact that their movies bombed or didn't do good. As for recommendations, do I recommend this show? Definitely. This show is going to be a candidate for what I think are Disney's most underrated cartoons and what I think are the most underrated cartoons of all time. Would I go as far as saying that this is my favorite cartoon from Disney? No, but it is one that I would consider as one of the higher candidates in the 8 out of 10 section along with Nightmare Ned. I still need to figure out where this cartoon would compete, since there's a handful of cartoon shows from the Mouse House that I consider great. There's only really a few minor issues that I have with this series. Most of the show is timeless, and you could watch it at any time. The only certain element from the series that did make it age a lot is the episode Science Not Fair, where Mary Lou mentions that Leonard is part of the class of 2011. When you're watching the show after 2011, that line starts to become really distracting. And the other problem with this show, while this is small, The show does have a lot of moments where characters, specifically the adults, give the death stare towards either Spot or Leonard whenever they made a simple mistake, or in one case, they were guilty to a point where they come clean. This isn't a huge issue. This problem is in a select few episodes, and it only happens in one particular scene in a few of the episodes. And to this show's credit, it's not nearly as bad with this problem as Ollie's Pack, because Teacher's Pet doesn't have this problem containing to all of its episodes, and their unpleasant sequences are in only one scene, and then they're done. Whereas with Ollie's Pack, the episodes that I've watched so far are all unpleasant, with literally only 2 episodes that weren't unpleasant, and the ones that are kept me constantly backing away from the screen in discomfort throughout the episodes, to a point where it turned me away from the show entirely. And when I do get around to watching each of its episodes and preparations for a review on that, I'll definitely be bringing up this problem, even though I'm personally not looking forward to doing that. But back on topic. Even though this issue isn't prevalent throughout an entire episode, there is at least one point where they did manage to pull this problem all throughout an entire episode. That episode is A Lick is Still a Kiss, where Leonard is accused of spreading a rumor to his classmates that he kissed Leslie, which is my least favorite episode of the series, because this issue with the unpleasant tone is spread all throughout the episode, particularly with Leslie and Strickler, and the overall plot didn't even need to happen, where it wouldn't have happened if Leonard didn't tell the other kids about the lipstick that Leslie had on, and if Spot didn't tell Leonard about the lipstick that she had on. But other than that, Teacher's Pet is a definite pass. If you're a fan of surreal and adult-like shows like Rocko's Modern Life and Animaniacs, shows that have a mixture of being in the real world and being crazy like Ren and Stimpy or the Angry Beavers, or even chilled and laid-back shows like Hey Arnold, then this show is a must-watch, even though there are some lines of dialogue that are dated by today's standards. If you want to know how you could watch this series, it's available on Disney+, Disney's streaming service, or in the case if you don't have Disney+, all of the episodes are available on Dailymotion, or alternatively watch cartoons online. Though this wouldn't be the last time that they treated a cartoon show so poorly. Disney still had to go through a Dave the Barbarian and a Wander Over Yonder before they started keeping their show's network airing premieres exclusive to a channel, and before they would start giving their shows a fair chance. I might give those shows a network review someday and talk about the film that was based on this show in its own review, but I have no time to discuss them fully here as this review comes to a close.